I'm Marty from Mighty Car Mods. Welcome to my shed. Welcome to another special episode of Mighty Car Mods. A lot of you have asked for shed tours and toolbox tours, and we thought it's about time that we did it. No, we're not at MCM HQ right now. We're at my own shed, which some of you may have seen before. We have done a few jobs here and there, some stuff on Too Sexy and when we've needed a hoist, and yes, there is a hoist, which I'll get to shortly. But first, I want to take you back right to the beginning of how this all started. Come with me. Here is a shed. Well, it's exactly what the shed looks like now, with the exception of the roof panels being slightly different, that I actually drew up. To rewind a little bit, it is a dream shed, mostly myself with a bit of help, did it all up and made it nice. But the most important thing, and the only thing I really cared about was there enough room for a shed? I drew up a shed and I got a shed builder to come and actually make it. So I gave them that exact example of where I thought everything should go, where windows should go, roller doors should go, where the hoist would go, storage, windows. And if you look around, it's actually pretty much exactly turned out the way I wanted. And the dimensions are that so that it fits a hoist. That was always the purpose. Hoists are awesome because you don't have to roll around on concrete on your back, because that gets really old really quickly and just opens up possibilities of car storage. It also turns your 2-car garage with a workshop area into a 3-car garage because you can stack cars on it. You can also put the hoist 90 degrees the other way, which I have seen done, and then you can enter from this side, so you end up with sort of like a 2-car garage, but it's deeper. That wouldn't work with the block, and also the shed faces north, which means you get really nice light through the roof panels. And yes, the roof panels, one is over the workshop side, one is over the storage side, and I don't have one over the hoist side because if you've got a car in the air, you're just pouring sunlight onto the top of your car. These also add a lot of heat, which brings me to the next situation. You've got your mad shed, you want to be comfortable. What do? You notice that the walls are lined. If that stuff looks familiar, it's because it's actually flooring. We call it yellow tongue here in Australia, and it's like a compressed flooring that people put down before they put floating floors on, or just use it and then put carpet over it. It's cheap and accessible and easy to get and good sizes for what I want to do, because the walls I think are 3.6, and I think you can buy those in 3.6 meter lengths. So they all just sort of puzzle together. Now behind all of that is insulation, like fiberglass insulation. And then there's a bit I haven't finished at the top, but I'm going to talk about that. And then there is just a basic reverse cycle aircon in case it gets really hot, because in Australia it can get up to over 40 degrees in summer in here. Winter never gets cold. We're in winter now, and it's like shorts, sleeves, now jumpers. So it does have an aircon to keep it comfortable. With the doors down and the sun pumping, it can still get quite toasty, but it's still good enough to be able to get work done. And in terms of the sizes, 6.3 meters deep and 9 meters wide, which is the absolute maximum I was able to do. This is actually one car spot bigger than what you're allowed to do, but because there was already a shed on the block, they made an exception, and that's a big long story that I won't bore you with. But anyway, that's where we got to with the shed. Now, since it was a bare shell, I also put on the floor a polycuramine coating, which I got from Super Cheap Auto. There are some cracks in the floor already with a slab this big. Sometimes it happens, but they're not structurally a problem. This whole slab is 150 mil thick. Because I was doing the hoist, that's the minimum you need to use the hoist, but usually you can just pour a deeper footing around the hoist posts themselves, but instead we opted just to do the entire slab a lot thicker. And then the floor has been coated. That's mostly to keep the dust down. Some people do it for appearance. I chose to do it mostly because it's easy to clean. It can get slippery, but if you're conscious of when you spill something, you got to clean it up. It's not the end of the world. It also had flakes down. A lot of people like to put those decorative flakes, but what happens if you've got decorative flakes and you do something like that and drop stuff on the ground, all that, what does that look like? Flakes, especially if it's just one little bolt. And so you're trying to find these little tiny things in flakes. So I actually did put flakes down, but then I covered it again, which gives it a little bit of grip. And you can see from a couple of years use, like it's pretty grubby, but you can still get in here and mop it, and it still, again, keeps that concrete dust that's constantly being kicked up is no longer part of the equation. The next thing to do once I got the actual shed and lined the walls was to get a workbench area, and I chose to put it under the 2 windows so I had nice light. They are 1060 to the top, so that's kind of for me a comfortable height. And when you're making your own benches, it's cool that you can sort of customize that. You'll notice that they're made out of racking, like a medium duty pallet racking. This stuff is cheap and pretty strong, and it also comes with these tops. So it had just the normal, whatever that is, particle board top, and then I put another layer of benching on top of that and tied that into the wall. I've also gone sort of a comfortable level deep with that at 740. Most of these things, this was all ripped down, so you'd normally have a standard of 400 or 600. I've gone a bit bigger, again, because it's as far as I can reach. So that's about making the space ergonomic for yourself while also having lots of bench space. Some essentials, I think, if you're working on cars. Air compressor, not as essential as it used to be. Now power tools are so good, but I still find myself going for this occasionally, especially just for compressed air to blow stuff and cleaning stuff. Then of course the welders, a TIG and a MIG. These are the same welders that we have at MCM HQ. And the gas I use is just stuff you can go and swap out at the local hardware shop anytime that they're open. And so MIG welder, TIG welder, they're both on 15 amp circuits, which brings me to power. And so I have one 15 amp circuit here, another 15 amp circuit at the other side, so you can sort of get to either welding on the bench on the vise, or you can get to underneath the car without having to run extension cords. And if you do need extension cords, 15 amp ones. And then otherwise I have power points reasonably regularly. They say you can't have too many, and in a workshop environment that's probably the case. These are all the same height around the whole place, and they're all on a couple of different circuits in case I need to load them up, so the whole way around. In terms of lighting, there's floodlights. I've got a main set of lights and benches as well, so you can just use one or the other. You do get a lot of light through these clear panels, which although you do pay the price in terms of heat, you don't really need the lights on during the day. It works pretty well as it is. This is also racking as well, so I decided to put power tools in one area and hand tools in another. So I've got all the Roby stuff that are used regularly. This is pretty much mirrors what we have at MCM HQ. And I've done that on purpose with a lot of stuff so that when we're just bumping through getting things done, everything's where you expect it to be. So the big charger, I've got a fast charger too, I find that good. And also some 36 volt system as well, which is more for like garden tools and whatever high current things, but that's useful also. I've got an older toolbox here that just has sort of more construction and building and old tools. It doesn't really need to be there, but sometimes it's just good to have someone to move it on. So before toolbox, we might talk a little bit about what got me into cars in the first place. So ever since I was a kid, like so many people, RC cars, you know, if you're lucky for a birthday or at Christmas, there'd be a remote control car that someone got from Tandy or Dick Smith for you, and you just be loving life until you smash it into a gutter. And I have told this story before, but one of my neighbours' dads was the kind of dude that was like, I'm going to chop the 8-year-old kid in the street with my fancy remote control car and then laugh at him that his remote control car is faster. So that was fine, except then I worked out that if you doubled the amount of batteries you put in your remote control car, it would go really fast and then chop him, which I did, and then my remote control blew up the next day. But it felt really good. But it got me into the whole modifying thing anyway. So these are a couple of like older ones. These are an older chassis, but there's a few of these that I've blown up over the years. And this is my spares box full of stuff. So GTR, man, dude, do you reckon this is worth as much as the actual GTR? It'd be close. That's not. I'm going to keep that because that's like my retirement fund right there. Anyway, so yeah, a couple of remote control cars and spares boxes left over. And these days you can get stuff off eBay for $50 that would just annihilate anything that came stock on one of these. But pretty cool JDM little remote control cars. So if this toolbox looks familiar, that's for a reason, because it is the same one that we have at MCM HQ. We like these ones because it has a bench top on top and you can pull it out and use it as a bench. Don't really need to do that a lot here, but you do have the option if things are getting really busy, you've got your bench space and then you can pull the toolbox out and move it around. I like that everything is pretty much in the same design. Everything's in the same drawers. Spanners are stuff you're using all the time, like long spanners, and then, you know, sockets, screwdrivers. The stuff that you're reaching for all the time is at the top and super accessible, pliers. And then as you go deeper, you've got the stuff you don't use as much, which is specialty stuff, you know, brake bleeding and hole saws and things you're only reaching for occasionally. I can just fit everything I need into a toolbox this size. It's probably not quite as neatly arranged. And I do sometimes find myself going, oh man, I wish I had that thing, and it's at the other shed, but I guess I'm lucky that there's 2 sheds I can work on cars in. Doing the new building was also an awesome way to add a bit of sustainability into the mix. So there's a huge roof space. Again, it's 9 meters wide, 6.3 meters deep. I think that ends up to just under 60 square meters, which means there's a lot of roof up there. So I decided that all the water that I catch in that roof would be directed into tanks. So there's 2 tanks, one's 2,500 and one is, I think, 4,500 or 5,000. So 7,000 liters of water storage, which I've also got on a pump. And you basically just switch the pump on here and you've got all the water that you might need to use for the shed or watering plants and gardens and stuff, which is pretty cool. And also all the power here is coming from a solar system as well. It's a 12 kilowatt solar system with a battery. So right now all the lights and everything we're running off will be running off what's coming from the sun, because in winter from about 10 a.m. onwards, you're collecting till about 3 in the arvo. And the battery runs it into the night as well, which is pretty awesome also. It is difficult to keep a shed this size especially tidy because the you know, everyone goes, oh man, you've got a shed, can I just store that thing in there for, it'll only be in there for a couple of days, and then 3 months later you've got 5 motorbikes and 10 cars and all sorts of rubbish. So most of the stuff here gets used reasonably regularly. It's like just renovation tools and more building stuff is here. Cleaning chemicals, sanding things. A lot of this, if you at the MCM garage, you've got the boxes up top. It basically mirrors that as well. So painting, sanding, electrical stuff, and then miscellaneous fasteners and brackets and cutting tools and, you know, grinding discs and all that kind of stuff that you are using reasonably regularly. And then just sort of junk storage, but stuff if you throw away, you always end up going and buying again, like tie downs or those kind of things. And then there's just paint, which is hard to throw away actually, and also handy to have various colours around the shed and around the place, and a bit of just home gardening stuff lives over here. I've tried to use vertical storage where I can. I do have a lot of vertical space, and so for deep storage of like long materials like wood and metal and whatever, I have that storage system as well, and then just some buckets of, you know, old stuff, painting and tarps and camping gear and motorbike gear and luggage if we're going lucky enough to be going overseas and shooting stuff in other countries, which at the moment we're not, but that's okay because we've got this mad shed. And then of course you've got to get to and from your shed, and you guys know about all the cars that we have, and you probably also know that we like motorbikes. I've had a couple of motorbikes over my time for about maybe the last 15 years, but this one is something I've sort of landed on in a nice little compromise of just a bike that's cool to buzz around on. You could probably ride it across Australia, but I'm not going to. This is a G310. It's a BMW. It's an Indian-made BMW, single banger, 310cc, heaps of power, and it's quite new. And I bought it with less than 1,000 Ks on it because someone had bought it, got their oils, and then decided they didn't like motorbikes anymore. So that's a bike I just fang around on occasionally. And I also have my Wide Wheel Pro scooter. This is electric, again, charged off the sun. It has a nice little feeling when you're riding along that you just like driving on electrons from the sun, which is pretty cool. And that will get up to about 50 Ks an hour. Not legal on the road, so I don't ride it on the road. I just ride it on my private track and driveway. Have been known to do laps of tracks on this thing as well. Next is probably the star of the show. You may have noticed that there's some stuff on wheels. So I've got the engine lifting equipment, engine, what are they called again? Engine stands. And then this table here, which is pretty cool. So this is a Red Ranger product that is made by the same guys that make the Hoist. That's actually a drain table. That's why the chainsaws are on it, because they leak oil. And what's cool about this is it'll drain into that hole, and then you can pull out the drawer the other way, and it captures all the crap that falls off engines. So if you're tearing down an engine, those things are awesome. It takes up a lot of space, but it is quite useful as just one more working space, and I just move it out if it's in the way. And the other thing that's on wheels as well, we've got the toolboxes obviously, there's a gearbox jack in here, there is a drain for oil, and then yeah, a couple of dollies and other things just to move stuff around, because you can just clear the space out if you need to, and then the rest of the oils and consumables live up here. So engine oil, gearbox oil, coolant, the stuff that you need all the time, especially because having the Hoist is great for doing services. You can quickly drive a car in, whiz it up, change it oil, change your gearbox oil, whatever you want to do. And a few things like hoses and other stuff that are used occasionally, jugs, things like that. And then the only bit of organisation I have in terms of this is screws, because for general hardware and just fixing things like when we're doing the walls, it's just handy to have that labelled. So I usually just cut off the ticket of what it is and stick it on and stick it in that. It does come in quite handy. That takes a long time to organise, so I'm always 50-50 on whether that's worth doing, because you could also just stick it in a box, and for the 10 seconds it takes to find the thing, it takes you 10 hours to make that, but it's still cool to look at, I guess. So everything charges over here, power tools over here, toolboxes over there, workbench, linisher. This is one of my favourite things when you're making stuff. If you're welding and you're not a great welder, you almost always need one of these, but these are good for cleaning electrodes and also just tidying things up. You don't need a hoist. But do you want a hoist, and should you want a hoist, and should you try and get a setup like this if you can manage it? It just takes all the stress off your body. It's an ergonomics thing. It's just about getting the stuff that's happening in the car, which is usually underneath, up and away from you so that you're standing. Because when you're ever on concrete, you're lying on your back, you're pushing against concrete, you don't have the leverage. Here you can get a car in the air, get a big breaker bar under it, you can smack stuff with hammers. All that stuff is really, really good. Now we don't have one at MCM HQ because the room just isn't the right shape for it, and there's issues with the slab. But here it was purposely made so that we could have a hoist, and there's stuff that we can quickly do, jobs that we can quickly do here that's really, really easy. But MCM HQ is a better environment to shoot stuff for other reasons, which maybe we'll go into one day. But in terms of how this hoist is designed, it's sort of the minimum size it needs to be. You'll also notice that the hoist columns are tilted like asymmetrically. That's on purpose. So the idea is that you back a car in up the driveway, and then you back the car in so that all the work that you're doing is at the front. So the car will end up about here. You've got good access to all your tools, and then all the stuff, not as much usually happens at the back. So the idea is that the arms and everything is asymmetric, so when you open the door, you get a little bit more opening room, because if these were flat there, you'd be hitting it. So that's the purpose of that. If you've got more space, you don't really need it. I've got this in a narrow configuration, so it's sort of the minimum that you want to be. Like a big Ford Ranger or a Tesla Model X or some big car that fits on here would basically use the whole space. The Mira or the K-Truck, you've got to extend the arms the whole way. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. I've had no dramas with anything hitting the roof. It's a really nice work environment, and hoists themselves are not expensive, but getting everything to the point where you can install a hoist, that is a bit more difficult. Building a shed, I had to save up for a long time to be able to sort of set this up, but I'm so happy with how it's set up. Could it be bigger? Absolutely. 2 or 3 times the size. Chuck an extra hoist in, but then you're in workshop territory, and this is a great size for like a hobbyist or enthusiast shed. 2 roller doors, 3 cars, hoist, all the tools, welders, fabrication stuff. I don't really think there's much missing. There's even a press there. That doesn't get used that much, but it's great to have it. And I've always got in mind, what are you going to need at 9 o'clock on a Friday night when you're trying to fix your car to do something the next day? Can you do it? And if you've got a press, you've got a hoist, you've got some fab gear, there's not much that can really slow you down. Unless you own a Subaru, then you'd blow engines constantly. But anyway, that's my shed. I don't think I've forgotten anything. It's an awesome place to be. Thanks for coming on a shed tour. Maybe we should look at your shed. Should we go look at your shed? Would you like to see Moog's shed? Yeah, you should show them. Yours is awesome. So different. It is so different, and but I reckon that'll be really interesting. We should do that. All right. Thanks for watching. See you next time.